Hello Biblionauts, I am Grix and many other things. And today I wanted to talk again about audiobooks, or maybe more accurately, interpretation. I have watched just a minute ago Greg's at Another Bibliophile Reads video about his love for audiobooks, and of course couldn't help but join in the conversation, since I have become at this point an advocate for interpretation rather than original in certain cases. By the way, someone told me the other day that this university is the place where George Eliot studied. Given the date at which George Eliot wrote, I think that is not true. But if anyone can confirm to me in the comments if George Eliot did indeed study at a university, in this university, Royal Holloway University, I will give you a university tour in Christmas, since actually I'm away in Christmas. Well, I'll give it to you when I'm back, since it's pretty cool, especially the old part. And since I don't have much in the way of respect for social rules, norms, conventions, and boundaries, I know every single room there is to know in that university, including those that I am not allowed to visit. So yeah, going back to the audiobooks conversation, I listen to audiobooks sometimes, and although I believe them to be just as potentially valuable as the books that they are audiobooking, I don't treat them that way. I tend to discriminate them and only use them when I am wanting to finish a book I don't want to finish, or when I want to read something that is for me an informative value, normally to do with DIY or sports. Like sports science and nutrition, but I don't often come across books that are good enough for me to read them with the time that involves. And I have a lot of capacity to focus when I'm hearing something in general, but that means that I can listen to them at a certain speed and take notes and quickly get out the information that I need from those books. However, I actually agree with Greg that audiobooks have just as much potential to be enjoyed as plays or films in relation to books. It's just a completely different medium. It can be an art, and it can also be done correctly or badly. Another example of that are translations. Sometimes certain translations are better than the original book that you would be reading. I found that to be the case with Picture of Dorian Gray, which I read first in Spanish and then in English. But the Spanish version, the translation, I enjoyed a lot more than the English version. That might be flawed though, because my English understanding was very limited at the time I read Picture of Dorian Gray. Fucking planes, man. It's so disgusting. Noise, pollution. Oh, I hate it. Okay, yeah, so can you hear anything, or is the sky falling upon us all? However, audiobooks, we are talking about audiobooks, no translations. Another Bibliophile Reads, Greg, gives a lot of arguments for audiobooks in relation to books, not as a substitute, but as a complement and as a nice alternative if you are looking for some new form of approaching the same book. Of course, audiobooks, being a version of something that already exists in a different format, are also an option to encounter through a different perspective, through another lens that work. I feel like people who questions that audiobooks as a format come from two places. Either come from a place of having certain prejudices about them, or being afraid that if they were to advocate for audiobooks, they would be considered non-readers, and everyone would already assume that they don't read any books, that they only listen to audiobooks. But that would make sense outside of BookTube, but I don't think that inside here anyone doubts anyone else's readings. I think that's just stupid. And there's nothing to gain here for doing that. So I'm gonna dismiss that. However, in relation to those prejudices, I think that one of the most valid objections that I've heard of, and which Greg also addresses and gives his own counter arguments to this objection, is that audiobooks are an interpretation, and therefore you are not getting the work itself, you are getting the new authors of the adaptation version of that book. My arm is getting tired, I'm just gonna swap. If I swap completely, you could have to turn around your computer, so I won't swap completely. But that might be partially the case if the interpretation is not done correctly, but also that can be as much in benefit as in detriment of that book. I certainly don't want to argue that every interpretation of a book is necessarily going to be better than that book, but it can be. I have done that with translations already, I have talked about it, but to give you a different example, I think that Chekhov his plays tend to be better read than watched. I think that Shakespeare's plays tend to always be better played than read. So what I'm trying to say is that here you have two classical authors of definitely not similar importance, because Shakespeare is Shakespeare, but that are considered to be very good at what they do, and what they do shines best in different formats, not necessarily in the written version in both cases, and not necessarily in every case like that. I don't know if you can hear the airplane, I just don't like them. I don't like to be in them. I've taken about 59 at this point flights on my life, and I hated every single one of them. So what I'm trying to say is that there's no rule or statistic or one fits all claim when it comes to audiobooks and books in general. They are interpretations. Because of that, I think that you should read the original. I think that you shouldn't do anything. You should do whatever you want to do. But if you want to understand a book as a whole, the best thing that you can do is read and reread the original, and then watch every other format, every other possible version that you have of understanding that, Of course, you want to read Moby Dick because it's amazing. It's the best book ever. I love Moby Dick. But maybe after that you want to watch some of the movies that have been made about it. You maybe want to see paintings inspired on that novel. You might even want to watch lectures. Of course, lectures and paintings are no longer the story itself. They are not adaptations. But what I'm trying to say is that changing the format changes the lens. The more eyes you have, the more angles you can see of that work, the better. So, although I don't myself use audiobooks generally for classic books or for books that tend to be sort of like an experience in themselves to read, although I don't necessarily predicate with example, I do think that ideally you would want to, if you like a book, if you respect a book as a piece of art, you could not show more respect to that book as to watch everything that thing has generated. Consume, read, listen to every single version of that thing. One example, just to wrap up, would be, I have had many jobs, right? And one of them was as a chef, right? Now, if someone tells you, make me a lasagna, you can do a number of things, right? They give you a certain amount of ingredients and you cannot remove or add any ingredient to that. But you can treat those ingredients in a number of different ways. If you were to do it in the way my grandma used to do it, you would probably get to a Platonic way of how to do a lasagna in the best way possible. However, that is only one of the many ways. If you were to do a lasagna in a different way, that could easily be better or worse depending on your own tastes. However, to get at lasagna itself, you would probably want to try every single lasagna that there is and then make your own choice. Also, each of us has a grandma, and maybe your grandma has a different recipe that uses the same ingredients that still provides a better result for your own view, which is wrong. My grandma makes the better lasagna. But what I'm trying to say here is that you can take a bunch of ingredients and change them 1,000 times. And every single time you are still making lasagna, so long as it looks like lasagna and it tastes like lasagna. But not every single time it has to be the same. And the fact that it changes only shows your capacity as a chef to be creative, to improve, to explore new ways to approach the same dish. I don't see anything wrong with that. And on that note, I shall leave and see you soon on the other side. Thank you, BookTube.